Hey there, it's Dr. Nadia, and welcome to another episode of Straight Talk About Sales. Um, I have been debating how I wanted to share this story, but I have to tell you, I have to share this story. So recently, my husband Toby bought a new car, and that process was really, really interesting. And there were so many lessons, but there was one that stood out the most as a salesperson. And it was fun watching him go through that process and being that person that he bounced stuff off of. And I was watching, just kind of mortified in some instances of how he was treated by salespeople. So here are a couple things. And there's one big lesson I want to share today, especially as you're looking at how to improve your skills as a salesperson, is to simply listen. Now, there's another instance. So here, let me just give you the story. So Toby, like I said, decided to buy a car. If you've ever heard me share anything about my husband, he's an engineer to the core. Oh my gosh. And so he'd already done his research. He'd checked everything out and really, and I always tease him, like he has to have 97 million spreadsheets. And he teases me back because he's like, dude, you're an engineer too. But that's beside the point. Focus, Nadia. So anyway, he decided, hey, I want to get this car, and this is what I want, kind of looking at some things, some different options, price points, blah, blah, and blah. Got the money. So he had the check in hand, and off he goes to, find his dream car. So we had actually had a recommendation or referral for someone that could help him. So he reached out to her first, told her what he wanted, blah, 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 blah. And she got back to him. And at first she didn't have it. But after he didn't hear from her for a while, he decided to move on. So this is a bonus because this is not my main point, but definitely follow up. So then he reaches out to another dealership, met a salesperson, went in and talked with them, test drove the car. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is definitely it. He was just like, I really like this guy. He's straight up. He's honest. I feel like he's listening to me. And so then we start going down this road of the process and the sales manager and this person and that person and blah, 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 right? So he went back and he met with them again. And long story short, he had the day off. And so they were kind of going back and forth texting because he didn't have a final price. Mind you, check in hand, but he didn't have a final price on what the car would be. And they just kept kind of going back and forth, and it took forever. He said it took over 2 hours to finally, and that was after he visited. So he went in and visited and left and was texting and calling, and they were mostly texting back and forth and still didn't have a price. So finally, after like pulling teeth, and he's looking at me like, dude, why is this so hard? And I was like, they're not listening. They're not listening to you. They're not listening to, what it is you say you want. They're not listening to the experience you desire. They're not listening to the fact that, dude, you have everything. Like, you're a dream client, right? Or customer. They're just not listening. So he's super frustrated. So he's looking at me and I'm like, all right, babe, got you. So I was like, well, where else have you looked? So, I go online, I check out a couple places. I did a search on the type of car that he wanted. And I was like, well, have you looked at some of these other places? Because there are also actually a couple of good deals out there. And they have some things where he was willing to settle. This is the other thing. He's willing to settle on a couple of things. He's like, I don't know if I really want that, but it's all right, right? Call this final dealership. Within 10 minutes, he had the price to walk out the door done for the car and ready to rock and roll. We went in the next day. The first car they were talking about, they'd already sold because that was such a sweet deal. But she listened to what he had to say, called him the next morning. I was like, hey, I have a couple other things I think you would like based on what you shared, because she listened. And you see a recurring theme here? She listened to what he said. He's great. My wife and I'll come in. And we went in and I just kind of hung back, and she came down and she introduced, and everybody knew, like they knew who I was. So when we walked in and he was like, hi, I talked to so-and-so and we were coming in. My name is Toby. He's like, and you must be Nadia. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm impressed, right? So then they told us and they took us out. They'd already pulled a car around that one of the ones that he thought he liked. And they were like, tell us what you want, and we can pull up some other stuff depending on if you like this. So he walked around and he had his checklist, and we're going through our checklist, and he's like, all right, let's take it for a spin. We took it for a spin, came back, did all the paperwork in less than, I would say 90 minutes, 2 hours max. We were in the car headed to lunch and to the museum because that's what we planned to do that day. Car paid for, done, signed, sealed, delivered, and they delivered it to our house later that evening. Why did it take the third salesperson? They were not the first. They were not the first option. One, they followed up, but two, more importantly, they listened. So if you don't hear anything else that I shared as a salesperson, as you're out there and you're meeting people and you're talking to your potential clients and you're inviting them to work with you, listen. And I invite you to actually record your calls. I often use Uber Conference. And one of the things that I like about Uber Conference, if you choose this setting, is that you can, when you get the call, it sends you a report after the call is done. And it includes the link to recording, but it'll send you a report whether you record a call or not. And it'll show you the names and or phone numbers of the participants on the call. And it'll show you how many minutes each person spoke throughout the time of the call. So you can start to really gauge and track, am I talking too much when I'm talking to people and I'm inviting them to work with me? Is that the big problem and, big challenge that I'm facing? Because what if the one thing you needed to tweak in how you're working and inviting people to work with you and your whole sales process, what if the one thing you needed to tweak was to listen? What if that was it? To just sit back, ask questions, and listen. That is why I always have a pen. I have my notebook. A lot of times you'll see me shoot my videos because I have a pen. I'm always ready. But I listen. I listen to what people say. Matter of fact, just yesterday, I had a sales call with a potential client, and I'd actually spoken with her back in October of 2017, so about roughly 6 months ago. And when I saw that she'd applied to have this conversation, I was like, oh, we've spoken before. I went back and I got my notes. I am a pen and paper girl. There are all types of online tools that I do recommend you use. I use them. Remember, your tools work for you when you use them. But I went back, I grabbed my notebook, and I was like, oh my gosh, here are all my notes. And so we got on the phone, and we were having this conversation. One of the things that I told her is like, you haven't moved, you haven't taken any action, you haven't done anything since our last conversation, because I feel like Groundhog's Day, we're having the same conversation we had 6 months ago. Why was I able to do that and really call her out on what it is and help her move forward in her business and her vision of what she wants to do, what she said she wants to do, was because I listened. And even then, as I listened, I was looking at my notes like, oh my gosh, this is like, dude, did we record this? And now we're playing a recording? Seriously. So again, I encourage you to listen to your prospects, listen to your clients. There's so much valuable feedback. And sometimes it's nerves, sometimes it's excitement, sometimes it's our ego. Whatever it is, I invite you to just be quiet and listen. How might that change the trajectory of your business? And I've opened my calendar up for some Fix My Biz sessions. So if you want to chat with me, trust me, I'll listen. Head on over to meetwithdrnadia.com. That's meetwithdrnadia.com. And let's talk about what are the challenges you're facing with hitting your revenue goals. What are some opportunities, some gaps, or, what do you have envisioned for the remaining 3 quarters of 2018? Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Dr. Nadia. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.